The arrival of the princess. On a distant planet called Zoreth, vibrant colors painted the sky at dusk. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers and the gentle hum of life. This beautiful world was home to many species, but none as majestic as the Zorethians. They were tall, graceful beings with shimmering skin that reflected the colors of their surroundings. Among them was Princess Lyra, the beloved daughter of King Orin. Princess Lyra was known for her beauty and wisdom. She often spent her days exploring the lush forests and rolling hills of her kingdom. Unlike her royal duties, these moments gave her joy. She loved to connect with her people, listening to their stories and learning from their experiences. The citizens admired her for her kindness, and they felt safe under her rule. However, not everyone was pleased with the princess. A dark force loomed over Zoreth. A rival faction led by a power-hungry warlord named Zarok sought to take control of the planet. He was ruthless and wanted nothing more than to conquer Zoreth and seize its riches. The people lived in fear of his threats, hoping that the royal family could protect them. One fateful day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the peaceful life on Zoreth came to a violent halt. Zarok's forces launched a surprise attack on the capital city. The sky darkened with the smoke of burning buildings, and the sounds of chaos echoed through the streets. People ran in all directions, desperately trying to find safety. Lyra's heart raced as she heard the commotion outside her palace. "Mother, father," she called out, rushing down the grand staircase. She found her parents already preparing for battle. King Orin stood tall, donning his royal armor, while Queen Mira comforted the frightened guards. "Lyra, you must hide," her father ordered, his voice stern yet filled with concern. "No, I want to help," Lyra insisted, determination shining in her eyes. "Stay safe. We will protect you," her mother replied, her voice trembling with fear. "Please, my dear." But as the sounds of battle grew louder, Lyra felt a sense of helplessness. She could not hide while her people were in danger. Gathering her courage, she slipped away from her family and made her way to the balcony. She could see the chaos unfolding below. Zarok's forces were everywhere, overpowering the guards and causing destruction. The sight broke Lyra's heart. She had to do something. Gathering her bravery, she descended from the balcony and rushed to the palace gates. "Stop," she shouted, her voice strong. But it was drowned out by the clashing of swords and the cries of her people. She wanted to fight for her kingdom, to show her strength, but she was met with opposition from her father's guards. "Your Highness, you cannot go out there," one guard pleaded, gripping her arm. But Lyra wrenched free and dashed into the fray. She knew the palace grounds well and maneuvered through the chaos. Her heart raced as she saw her people fleeing, and she called out to them, urging them to escape. "Run, get to safety," she shouted, feeling both terrified and empowered. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the ground, and the entrance to the palace crumbled. Dust and debris filled the air. Lyra gasped, her heart pounding. She turned to find a path to safety, but before she could reach it, she felt a heavy hand grab her shoulder. "Got you now, princess," a soldier from Zarok's army sneered, pulling her close. "Let me go." Lyra struggled, but he was too strong. Just then, a beam of light shot across the courtyard, striking the soldier and sending him crashing to the ground. Lyra looked up to see her father fighting bravely against Zarok's forces, but more soldiers were coming. "Father," she cried out, but he was too far away. Just as hope faded, a group of royal guards rushed forward, engaging the attackers. In the chaos, Lyra managed to break free, but she was not out of danger yet. With quick thinking, she darted through the crowd, searching for a place to hide. Finally, she spotted an open door leading to the palace's lower chambers. She slipped inside just as another explosion echoed outside. The dim light of the chamber offered some comfort, but fear gripped her heart. Lyra's mind raced with worry for her parents and her people. She had always been told that she was the protector of Zoreth, but now she felt anything but strong. The cries of the people outside grew softer, and soon there was an eerie silence. Hours passed, but it felt like days. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching. Panic washed over her. Was it Zarok's men? Her heart raced, and she held her breath, waiting for the worst. To her surprise, the door swung open, revealing a familiar face. It was her father, but he was battered and bruised, his armor dented and stained. "Lyra," he gasped, relief flooding his voice. "You're safe." "Father, what happened? Where is everyone?" she asked, her voice trembling. "They have taken the palace," he said, sorrow filling his eyes. "We are outnumbered. We must escape while we can." Lyra nodded, her heart heavy with fear and uncertainty. As they made their way through the dark corridors of the palace, she realized that this was only the beginning of a long and dangerous journey. Her heart ached for her people, and as they slipped away from the palace into the dark forest, Lyra vowed that she would find a way to save them. Despite her fears, a spark of hope ignited within her. She had to believe that help would come, and she would find strength in herself and those who would stand by her side. The true adventure was just beginning, and Lyra was determined to rise above the darkness that threatened her. The escape. As the night deepened, Princess Lyra and her father, King Orin, moved cautiously through the dense forest surrounding the palace. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting ghostly shadows that danced around them. The sounds of battle had faded into the distance, but the air was still thick with tension. Lyra's heart raced, her mind filled with worry for her people and uncertainty about their fate. "Father, we must go back," Lyra urged, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can't just leave them." King Orin shook his head, his expression grave. "We cannot fight them now, Lyra. We need to regroup and plan our next move. If we return, we risk being captured or worse." Lyra understood his reasoning, but it did little to ease her anxiety. The thought of her people suffering at the hands of forces made her stomach churn. But what about the others? What will happen to them? "We will find a way to save them," her father promised, though she could see the doubt in his eyes. He was trying to be strong for her, but the weight of their situation was heavy on both their hearts. They continued deeper into the forest, the trees closing in around them. Lyra's mind raced with thoughts of how they could fight back. She remembered the stories of brave warriors who had defended in the past. Could she summon that kind of strength? Suddenly, they heard a rustling sound nearby. King Orin motioned for silence, and they froze, straining their ears to listen. The sound grew louder, and from the shadows emerged a small group of. Their faces were dirty and their clothes torn, but their eyes sparkled with determination. "Your Highness," one of them called out, relief flooding their voice. It was Eldra, one of the palace guards. "We thought we lost you." Lyra's heart soared at the sight of familiar faces. "Eldra, you're safe," she exclaimed, rushing to embrace her. "What happened?" "We managed to escape during the chaos," Eldra explained, looking around nervously. "But we cannot stay here long. Men are searching for any survivors." "Yes, there is a hidden cave not far from here," Eldra replied. "It's known to a few loyal guards. We can take refuge there until it's safe to move again." "Lead the way," King Orin commanded, and the small group began to move quickly through the trees, staying low to the ground. Lyra felt a surge of hope. With the guards by their side, they might just stand a chance against forces. As they walked, Lyra noticed the exhaustion etched on the faces of the guards. They had all been through a great ordeal, yet their spirits remained unbroken. "Thank you for coming to find us," she said softly to Eldra. "I don't know what we would have done without you." "We would do anything for you, Princess," Eldra replied. "You are our hope. As long as you lead us, we will follow." Lyra felt a warmth in her heart at her words. She had always believed in the strength of her people, but now it felt as if they were all united in a common purpose. Together, they would reclaim their home. After a few tense moments of hurried travel, they arrived at the entrance to the cave. It was hidden behind a thick curtain of vines, almost impossible to spot unless you knew where to look. Inside, the cave was dark but spacious, providing shelter from the outside world. The group entered cautiously, keeping their voices low. As they settled inside, King Orin turned to his loyal guards. "We need to plan our next steps. Zarak will not stop until he has total control of Zoreth. We must regroup and find a way to fight back." Eldra nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "We need to gather more allies. Many loyal Zorethians are hiding in the forests. We can't let Zarak's forces intimidate us into submission." Lyra felt a surge of courage as she listened to Eldra. She realized that her voice mattered too. "We should reach out to other planets in our system," she suggested. "Maybe they can help us against Zarak. If we unite, we'll be stronger." King Orin looked at his daughter, pride shining in his eyes. "That's an excellent idea, Lyra. But we must be cautious. Zarak's spies could be everywhere." The group spent hours discussing their plans, sharing ideas, and strategizing ways to gather allies. Lyra listened closely, her mind racing with possibilities. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to her people and a growing determination to fight back against Zarak's tyranny. As they shared stories of bravery and courage, the atmosphere inside the cave began to lighten. Laughter and camaraderie filled the air, bringing a sense of hope. Lyra knew that even in the darkest moments, they could find strength in each other. The sun began to rise outside, casting warm rays into the cave. It was a new day, and with it came new possibilities. Lyra's heart swelled with hope as she looked around at her friends and allies. They were no longer just a group of survivors. They were a team united for a common cause. "We will find a way to defeat Zarak," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "We will protect our home and our people. Together, we are stronger than any threat that comes our way." The guards cheered, their spirits lifted. Lyra felt a newfound sense of purpose and knew that this was just the beginning of their fight. She was ready to embrace her destiny as the protector of Zoreth, and she would stop at nothing to save her world from the shadows of tyranny. The gathering of allies. The sun climbed higher in the sky, bathing the forest in golden light. Princess Lyra and her small group of loyal guards had spent the night in the hidden cave, sharing plans and strategies to counter the growing threat of Zarak's forces. They knew that time was of the essence. Every moment wasted could mean further suffering for their people. "Today, we gather our allies," King Orin declared as they prepared to leave the cave. "We must show them that we are still united and that we will not back down." Lyra felt a mix of excitement and nervousness at the prospect of reaching out to others. They would need every ally they could muster. "Where do we begin?" she asked, her eyes shining with determination. "Many of our allies will be hiding in the mountains," Eldra explained, adjusting her gear. "There are small villages there that have remained loyal to the crown. If we can get to them, we can rally support." "Then we must move quickly," King Orin said, leading the way out of the cave. The group emerged into the fresh morning air, the smell of damp earth and blooming flowers revitalizing them. They traveled silently through the forest, moving cautiously, but with a sense of purpose. After a few hours of walking, they reached the foothills of the mountains. The scenery began to change, with rocky paths and sparse vegetation. As they climbed higher, the air grew cooler, and the sounds of the forest faded into a serene silence. Finally, they arrived at a small village nestled between the mountains. The houses were modest but sturdy, built from the stones of the mountains themselves. As they approached, the villagers looked at them with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Stay close," King Orin instructed as they entered the village square. The villagers gathered, their expressions wary. Lyra felt a knot of anxiety form in her stomach. She knew how much they had suffered under Zarak's rule, and she understood their fear. "People of Zoreth," King Orin called out, his voice resonating with authority. I am your king, and I return to you today not just as a leader, but as a fellow Zorathian. Our world is in peril, and we must stand together." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A tall villager stepped forward, his face lined with worry. "Your Majesty, we have heard tales of Zarok's cruelty. Many of us have lost loved ones. Why should we believe you can defeat him?" Lyra took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Because we must believe in each other," she said, her voice strong. "I have witnessed the bravery and loyalty of our people. Together, we can drive Zarok back. We can reclaim our home." A quiet fell over the crowd as her words sank in. The villagers exchanged glances, uncertainty mingling with a flicker of hope. The tall villager nodded slowly, and the crowd began to murmur again, this time with growing enthusiasm. One by one, other villagers stepped forward, voicing their support. "We have been waiting for a sign," said an older woman, her eyes glistening with tears. "If you lead us, we will fight." As the villagers expressed their support, a sense of unity began to form. Lyra felt a surge of hope, realizing that they were not alone in their struggle. With each voice that joined their cause, her heart swelled with determination. After the villagers pledged their support, King Orin made a decision. "We will prepare for a gathering of all loyal Zorathians. We need to unite our strength, not just here, but across the entire realm." Lyra's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Let's send messengers to other villages. We can spread the word about our fight against Zarok and rally more supporters." The villagers sprang into action, organizing themselves to send messengers far and wide. Lyra and her group stayed in the village for a few days, training the villagers in combat techniques and strategy. They taught them how to use simple weapons and how to defend their homes. As they worked side by side, Lyra grew closer to the villagers. She listened to their stories and learned about their lives. Each person she met added to her determination to fight for their future. They were not just subjects, they were family. One evening, as they gathered around a fire, Lyra listened intently as the villagers shared their tales of bravery. Each story fueled her resolve. She knew that they would need every ounce of courage they could muster when the time came to confront Zarok. After a few days, news spread throughout the mountains. Other villages responded to the call for help, and soon a small army was forming. As more Zorathians joined their cause, Lyra felt a sense of purpose blossom in her heart. She realized that they were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for hope. The day of the gathering finally arrived. Villagers from all corners of the mountains converged in the village square. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement, and Lyra could feel the energy in the air. She stood alongside her father, looking out at the crowd, her heart racing. "Today, we unite as one," King Orin proclaimed, raising his sword high. "We stand against Zarok's tyranny, and we will not be silenced." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the mountains. Lyra felt a surge of pride as she joined in the celebration. She knew that together, they could make a difference. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Lyra looked out at the faces of her people. They were ready to fight for their freedom, and she would lead them. With a determined heart, she knew that they would reclaim their home and forge a future free from fear and oppression. The call to arms. The days flew by in a whirlwind of activity. The village buzzed with excitement and determination as more Zorathians joined their cause. Each new arrival brought a fresh wave of hope, and Lyra could feel the energy building within the growing army. The villagers trained hard, learning the art of combat and strategy. They were no longer mere farmers and craftsmen. They were warriors, ready to defend their home. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the valley, Lyra stood on a makeshift platform in the village square. She looked out over the faces of her people, a mix of old and young, their eyes reflecting the fire of determination. "Tomorrow, we will march to the heart of the enemy," she announced, her voice ringing clear. "We will show Zarok that we will not be taken lightly." Cheers erupted from the crowd, their enthusiasm palpable. But as the cheers faded, Lyra felt a weight settle on her shoulders. She knew they faced a formidable enemy, one that had brought devastation to their land. Her heart raced with a mix of fear and excitement. This was the moment they had been preparing for, and she was ready to lead them into battle. That night, as the villagers gathered around the fire, sharing stories and laughter, Lyra felt a sense of unity she had never experienced before. The bond they shared had grown strong, forged through hardship and hope. She listened intently as they spoke of their dreams for a free Zorith, each story igniting her spirit further. "Lyra, what will be our battle plan?" A young man named Aaron asked, his eyes shining with eagerness. "How do we strike against Zarok?" "Tomorrow, we will scout the enemy's camp," Lyra replied, her mind racing with strategies. "We need to understand their numbers and their defenses. Once we have that information, we can devise a plan to weaken their hold on our lands." Aaron nodded, his enthusiasm infectious. "I'll gather a small group of scouts to go with you. We'll move quickly and quietly." Lyra smiled, grateful for the support of her people. "Let's work together to ensure our safety. The element of surprise will be our greatest advantage." As the night deepened, Lyra lay awake, staring at the stars. She couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. Zarok was ruthless, and she knew he would not hesitate to strike back. However, she also felt a flicker of hope. Together, they were strong. Together, they could change the fate of Zorith. The next morning, as dawn broke, casting a golden light over the land, Lyra and her small group of scouts set out. The air was cool, filled with the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves. They moved silently through the forest, staying low and keeping their eyes peeled for any signs of danger. After a few hours of trekking, they finally reached the edge of Zarok's camp. The sight was overwhelming. Tents sprawled out in every direction, soldiers moving about, and the smell of smoke wafted through the air. Lyra's heart raced as she took in the scene. They were outnumbered, but the fire within her burned brighter than her fear. "Look over there," Aaron whispered, pointing to a group of soldiers gathered around a table, studying maps and reports. They seemed focused on their plans. Lyra nodded, her mind racing. "If we can get closer, we might overhear their strategies. We can learn their weaknesses." The group crept closer, moving silently among the trees. They ducked low, hiding behind a bush as they listened intently. The soldiers discussed their next moves, their voices low but filled with arrogance. "Once we crush these Zorithians, our conquest will be unstoppable," one soldier boasted. "They are weak, and they don't stand a chance against us." Lyra felt anger rise within her. How could they see her people as weak? They were not powerless. They were strong, united in their cause. She exchanged a glance with Aaron, and they both nodded. They had to act quickly. Suddenly, a loud shout echoed from the camp. "Intruders!" a guard cried, pointing toward the trees. Panic erupted as the soldiers scrambled, drawing their weapons. Lyra felt her heart race as she signaled to her group to retreat. They couldn't be caught. As they dashed through the trees, Lyra's mind raced with thoughts of the battle ahead. They had gathered valuable information about Zarok's forces, and now it was time to prepare their strategy. Back in the village, she gathered the people together once more. "Listen," she called, standing atop the platform. "We have scouted the enemy's camp, and they are overconfident. They believe us to be weak, but we will show them the strength of united Zorithians. Tomorrow, we will strike at dawn." The crowd erupted in cheers, their spirits high. They were ready to fight, ready to reclaim their homeland. As the night settled in, Lyra felt a sense of resolve wash over her. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. With a determined heart, she turned to her father. "We must prepare our warriors for battle. Every moment counts." King Orin nodded, his expression proud. "Together, we will reclaim Zorith and ensure our people can live in peace once more." As the villagers rallied, preparing for the battle of their lives, Lyra felt the weight of her responsibility. The lives of her people rested on their shoulders, but she was ready to lead them into the fight. They would prove their strength and resilience, standing together against Zorak and reclaiming their future. The battle begins. As dawn broke over the land, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink, the villagers of Zoreth were ready. Lyra stood at the forefront, her heart racing, as she surveyed the determined faces of her people. Each warrior was armed and armored, ready to fight for their homeland. Today was the day they would stand against Zorak and his forces. "Remember our training," Lyra shouted, her voice ringing clear. "We fight not just for ourselves, but for our future. We fight for Zoreth." Cheers erupted from the crowd, filling the air with energy and resolve. The villagers formed ranks, a mix of seasoned warriors and newly trained fighters. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders. She turned to her father, King Orin, who stood proudly beside her. "Are you ready, father?" she asked, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her stomach. "We have prepared well, Lyra. Trust in your training and your people. Together, we can overcome any challenge," he replied, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. As the sun climbed higher, casting its warm light on the battlefield, Lyra signaled for the march forward. They moved in unison, a wave of determination sweeping through the ranks as they approached Zorak's camp. The sound of their footsteps resonated in the air, a rhythmic beat echoing their resolve. Suddenly, a horn blared from the enemy camp, piercing the morning silence. Zorak's soldiers rushed to their positions, confusion and alarm spreading among them. Lyra could see the fear flicker in their eyes as they realized the Zorathians were upon them. "Now is our moment," she shouted, her heart pounding with adrenaline. "Charge!" With a unified roar, the villagers surged forward, weapons raised high. The sight of the Zorathian warriors charging together filled Lyra with pride. This was not just a fight. It was a stand for everything they believed in. The clash of metal filled the air as they engaged in battle. Lyra fought alongside her people, her sword slicing through the air with precision. She had trained for this moment, and now it felt surreal to be living it. She could see Iran fighting valiantly to her left, his determination unwavering. "Keep pushing forward," Lyra cried, rallying her warriors. "We cannot give up." The enemy fought back fiercely, but the Zorathians' spirit shone through. They fought for their land, their loved ones, and for the hope of a brighter future. The tide of battle began to turn in their favor, the sounds of victory mingling with the cries of struggle. Amidst the chaos, Lyra spotted Zorak on a hill, overseeing the battle with a fierce glare. He was larger than life, his armor glinting in the sunlight, and he carried a sword that seemed to command respect and fear. She felt a surge of anger rise within her. This was the man who had brought pain to her people, who had underestimated their strength. "Iran," she shouted over the din of battle. "We need to confront Zorak. If we take him down, we can shift the tide for good." Iran nodded, determination shining in his eyes. "Let's go. We can't let him intimidate us." The two of them fought their way through the fray, dodging attacks and striking back with everything they had. As they approached Zorak, the intensity of the battle heightened around them. Lyra could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, propelling her forward. When they finally reached Zorak, he was surrounded by a few of his most trusted warriors. The sight of the Zorathians charging at him caused a flicker of surprise to cross his face, quickly replaced by a sneer. "Foolish humans, you think you can defeat me?" Zorak bellowed, raising his sword. "I will crush you like the insects you are." "We are not insects," Lyra shouted back, raising her sword defiantly. "We are the people of Zoreth, and we will not bow to you any longer." With a fierce battle cry, they charged at Zorak, their swords clashing in a flurry of movement. The sound of metal against metal echoed around them, drowning out the chaos of the battle. Lyra and Iran fought side by side, their movements synchronized as they faced the formidable enemy. Zorak swung his sword with power, forcing them to evade and regroup. But Lyra felt an unwavering determination within her. She had come too far to back down now. With a sudden burst of energy, she feigned left, drawing Zarok's attention, and then swiftly moved right, aiming for his exposed side. Aeron followed her lead, striking from the opposite direction. Their coordinated attack caught Zarok off guard, and for a moment, victory felt within reach. The battle raged on around them, but in that moment, it felt like time slowed. Lyra focused solely on Zarok, her instincts guiding her every move. She could feel the energy of her people surging around her, fueling her determination. But Zarok was powerful, his strikes fierce and relentless. He pushed back, using his size and strength to his advantage. As he countered their attacks, Lyra felt the exhaustion begin to settle in. They needed to end this quickly. In a final surge of energy, Lyra channeled all her strength into one last strike. She could see the opening, the vulnerability in Zarok's defenses. With a fierce battle cry, she lunged forward, aiming for his heart. Aeron followed her lead, and together they struck. The clash of their swords rang out, and for a moment, silence fell over the battlefield. Then came the sound of metal piercing flesh. Zarok let out a roar of rage and pain, stumbling back as Lyra and Aeron held their ground. As he fell to the ground, the battlefield erupted in cheers. The Zorathians had faced their greatest enemy and emerged victorious. But as Lyra looked around, the fight was not over yet. There were still battles to be won, and she knew they had to stay vigilant. Victory is ours, but we must finish what we started. Lyra shouted to her people, "We must drive the remaining forces back and secure our land." With renewed energy, the Zorathians rallied together, ready to push forward. Lyra felt a swell of pride in her heart. Together, they had faced the darkness and had begun to reclaim their future. The aftermath of battle. The battlefield was a sight of mixed emotions. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the land, the Zorathians stood among the remnants of the fight. The air was heavy with the scent of smoke and the bittersweet taste of victory. Lyra surveyed the scene, her heart swelling with pride, but also burdened by the losses they had suffered. The cheers of victory echoed in the distance, yet Lyra could hear the cries of the wounded nearby. She had led her people to triumph, but the cost had been significant. The faces of the fallen haunted her thoughts. They had fought bravely, and she promised herself she would honor their sacrifice. "Lyra," Aeron called, rushing over to her side, his face smeared with dirt and sweat. "We did it. We defeated Zarok." "Yes," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But at what cost?" Aeron glanced around, taking in the wounded and the fallen. "We need to take care of our people. We can mourn later." Lyra nodded, knowing he was right. They had to tend to the wounded and ensure their survival before anything else. Together, they moved through the battlefield, offering comfort to those in pain and assessing the situation. "Medic, over here," Aeron shouted, leading a group of medics to a cluster of injured warriors. Lyra joined them, helping to bandage wounds and provide water. Her heart ached for each person who had fought alongside her, their bravery evident even in their suffering. As they worked, the villagers gathered around, some still recovering from the shock of the battle. Many were injured but alive, and they had a newfound sense of hope. Lyra could see it in their eyes, the fire ignited by their victory. "Lyra," a voice called. It was her father, King Orin, who had been busy organizing the villagers. He approached with a solemn expression. "We need to make a plan for the next steps. We can't let Zarok's forces regroup." Lyra wiped her brow and nodded, feeling the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders once more. "You're right, father. We must be vigilant. They will not take our victory lightly." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Lyra gathered the surviving warriors for a meeting. They sat in a circle, exhausted but united, the flickering firelight illuminating their determined faces. "Today, we faced a great evil, and emerged victorious. Lyra began, her voice steady. But our fight is not over. Zarek's forces will not stay quiet for long. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. Aaron stood beside her, nodding in agreement. We need to fortify our defenses and train our new recruits. We can't allow the enemy to surprise us again. Agreed. Cain Orin said, looking at the assembled warriors. We must gather our resources and prepare for the possibility of further attacks. We need to show our strength and unity. Lyra felt the energy in the room shift as her people listened intently. They were ready to stand by her side, to fight for their home and for each other. She could feel the strength of their bonds, the love for their land, and the desire for peace. As the discussions continued, Lyra glanced at the remnants of the battle scattered around them. The fallen soldiers were a stark reminder of the price of freedom. She felt a lump in her throat, knowing that their loss would be felt deeply. Tomorrow, we will hold a ceremony for our fallen heroes, she announced. We will honor their sacrifice and remember their bravery. They fought for us, and we owe it to them to carry their legacy forward. The crowd murmured in agreement, a solemn understanding passing among them. They would not forget those who had given everything for their home. It was a promise etched in their hearts. As the meeting concluded, Lyra took a moment to step outside the circle, seeking solace in the night sky. The stars twinkled above, a reminder of the vast universe that surrounded them. She felt small beneath their brilliance, yet she was filled with determination. Lyra, Aaron said softly, joining her outside the circle. You did well today. You led them with strength. Thank you, Aaron, she replied, her gaze still fixed on the stars. But I couldn't have done it without you and the others. We are stronger together. He nodded, a smile creeping onto his face. We'll face whatever comes next as a united front. I believe in us. With a newfound sense of purpose, Lyra returned to the gathering, ready to face the challenges ahead. They would rebuild, they would train, and they would stand strong. Together, they would protect Zoreth and honor those who had fought for their freedom. As the stars shone brightly above, a new determination settled in Lyra's heart. She would fight for her people, for the land she loved, and for the future they all dreamed of. The battle was just the beginning, and she would lead them with unwavering resolve. A new dawn. The morning sun rose over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the land. The remnants of the battle from the previous day were still fresh in everyone's minds, but today was different. Today marked a new beginning for the people of Zoreth. Lyra stood at the entrance of the village, taking in the scene around her. The warriors were up early, gathering supplies and preparing for the ceremony to honor their fallen comrades. She could hear the chatter of the villagers as they worked together, a spirit of resilience and unity filling the air. Lyra, Aaron called out, running toward her, a bundle of flowers in his arms. These are for the ceremony. I thought we could use some beauty to remember them. Thank you, Aaron, Lyra replied, taking the flowers from him. The colors were vibrant, a reminder of life amidst the sorrow. They will be perfect. As they made their way toward the gathering place, Lyra reflected on how far they had come. Just days ago, they had faced an overwhelming enemy, and now they were coming together to honor those who had fought bravely by their sides. She felt a sense of pride swell within her. They had faced adversity head-on, and their spirit remained unbroken. When they arrived at the clearing, a crowd had already begun to gather. The villagers stood together, their faces somber yet determined. In the center, a simple altar had been created with stones and the flowers Aaron had gathered. Cain Orin stepped forward, his face lined with worry yet filled with resolve. Thank you all for being here today. We gather to honor our heroes, those who gave everything for our freedom. A hush fell over the crowd as Lyra took her place beside her father. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she stood tall, knowing this was a pivotal point for their community. Today, we remember not only their sacrifices, but also the lessons they have taught us. Lyra began, her voice steady and clear. They fought for our home, for our families, and for the future we all desire. We will carry their memory in our hearts as we move forward." Iran stood next to her, holding a single white flower. "This flower represents purity and peace. As we place it on the altar, let us commit to fighting for a peaceful future, not just for ourselves, but for all those who inhabit this world." One by one, the villagers stepped forward, placing their flowers on the altar. The air was filled with a sense of solidarity, and Lyra felt the strength of her people as they honored their fallen comrades. As the last flower was placed, Lyra felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "Let us not forget the strength we have found in each other. We are more than just warriors. We are a family." The crowd nodded in agreement, their eyes reflecting the determination that burned within them. Suddenly, a young boy stepped forward, his small hand raised shyly. "Can I say something?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra smiled softly, nodding. "Of course, little one." The boy stepped closer to the altar, his courage growing with each step. "My father is one of the heroes. He always told me to be brave. I want to be brave too." Tears welled in Lyra's eyes as the villagers listened intently. "We all want to be brave," she said gently. "And you already are." The boy nodded, his face lighting up with pride. "Then I want to help. I want to train and be a hero like my dad." The crowd erupted into applause, and Lyra felt a renewed sense of hope. The future was bright, and it lay in the hands of the young ones who would carry their legacy forward. As the ceremony came to a close, Lyra looked around at her people. They had faced the storm together, and they would continue to do so. Together, they would rebuild their lives and stand united against any threat that dared to challenge their home. As they dispersed, Lyra felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Iran, his expression serious yet warm. "We did it, Lyra." "They are inspired." "Yes," she replied, her heart full. "And we will keep that spirit alive. We will train our people, strengthen our defenses, and prepare for whatever lies ahead." Iran nodded, determination shining in his eyes. "Together, we can achieve anything." As they walked back to the village, Lyra knew they had many challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The bond between them had been forged in battle, but it would thrive in unity and purpose. The sun shone brightly above, casting a warm glow on the village of Zoreth. With renewed strength and determination, they would face the future together, honoring their past while forging a new path for the generations to come. The legacy of their heroes would live on, not only in memory but in the spirit of every villager standing strong in the face of adversity. As Lyra looked up at the sky, she whispered a silent promise to the fallen. "We will not let your sacrifice be in vain. We will fight for peace and protect our home, no matter the cost." And with that promise, a new dawn began to rise over Zoreth, filled with hope, courage, and the unwavering spirit of its people.